everyone. So today we're going to talk about peer effects. Now, before we do that, how many of you guys got the emails about the assigned reading for today and then also for Thursday? Okay, who did not get it? All right, I sent an email from Canvas about the assigned readings for Thursday. You got it?
I have a question about that. The second link, I couldn't access it. Is that one of the files on Canvas?
The second link is broken. You should be emailed about it. I'll double check that. Okay. But you did get the email through Canvas.
Yeah, it was through Canvas. You have to turn on notifications.
Does Canvas link to your regular email, or do you have to check Canvas?
It might. It depends on whether you use g.comsin or regular comsin. But if you go into Canvas, you can change the settings so that it sends to you.
Can you guys please do that? Like, go to your Canvas and just click it so that it sends emails. You got it in your regular email? Okay. You got it too? Who got it in the regular email? Who did not get it?
I didn't get Thursday's reading on my regular email.
Yeah, I got it too.
Okay, so what to do is check with your group, make sure that you've gotten it. So as I've mentioned, we're gonna the ton of the course is gonna change quite a bit. So we're gonna be looking at a lot more papers and trying to read. And what I want to do is I want to ramp you up in terms of the amount of reading that we do. I don't want to just throw you in and say, hey, we have a gazillion papers to read. But I want to really start off by saying, okay, let's just take one or two papers and let's go through them. And I'm going to try to pick the papers that are going to be the most illustrative of the things that we're talking about in class, so we can go through them in a very careful way. So let me just preview what we're going to read on Thursday. So we're going to be reading this book that talks about peer effects with random room assignments. And so the whole idea in the peer effects literature is to say, well, how do the characteristics and also the actions of your friends, your peers, and the people that you're closest to impact you? So for example, you're sitting next to somebody, and if they were to just belch or fart, that would affect your learning capacity during the class, right? You'd be like, oh my God, this is so gross. And then you totally tune out for that 5 seconds in the lecture. Maybe that's the 5 seconds where I was like, okay, this is going to be on the final. And you missed that because this guy farted next to you, right? Or the person is doing Pokemon Go next to you, and then that distracts you. And so we want to really understand how do the actions and the attributes of the people that you associate with impact your own outcomes. And the reason why that's important is because a lot of times you don't have control over that, right? You don't have control over who are the other students that comes in the university. But if they happen to admit somebody who is a world-class football player, then all of a sudden you have the potential to get to know this person. And you might be doing accounting, and then you end up maybe the account manager for Sean Watson because you went to Clemson, right? And that fundamentally would change your earnings trajectory, for example. So these peer effects have potential to be particularly important. And when we look at education, you're in a setting where you're learning from each other. You're in a setting too. So last class we talked about the effect of class size. You're in a setting where the actions and the attributes of the other people that you're around can impact you. So I want you to read through this paper. The paper looks like it's really large, but typically how an economics paper is written is you put all of the graphs and the tables in the back of the paper. And so this paper has, I think, 26 pages of reading, and it's double spaced. And so that's 13 pages of reading. You all are juniors and seniors and graduate students here, so 13 pages of reading should not scare you. Right? Single space should not scare you. And then there are the associated graphs too. The way that you should read a paper is you look at the title, read the title first. That gives you a sense of what's happening. Then what you have next is what's called an abstract. And so this abstract will give you a highlight of what's happening in the paper. So for example, this paper uses a unique data set to measure peer effects among college-age roommates, blah, 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 right? And it's literally a paragraph long, so read the abstract. Then you want to read the introduction, and then jump to the conclusion. And so that gives you a high-level sense of what's going on. At the very minimum, you want to do that, right? And then you go back, and then you read through the rest of the paper. Because what can happen sometimes when you read a paper is if you go from cover to cover, you can run into something that's really technical, and you can be really intimidated. You can say, well, I don't really understand this. I'm going to quit reading this paper. Don't do that. Title first, abstract, introduction, then read the conclusion, then go through the body of the paper. I also want you to discuss it in your groups as well too. It's not a difficult paper to read, and I intentionally chose this one because I thought it was the most accessible paper and also the one that would be most related to your own experiences and to what we're doing in the class. Now, at the back of the paper, there are going to be tables. And the tables are typically going to be referenced throughout the paper too. So for example, like this is the first or the second regression table. And the way that these tables are organized is you have the dependent variables on the left-hand side here. And then each column is going to represent a particular regression, like y is equal to alpha plus beta x plus so on and so forth. And all of these here are going to be the explanatory variables. The coefficients on the top are going to be the size of the coefficients, and then the thing in parentheses beneath it is going to be the standard errors, which is going to allow you to compute t-statistics to see what is significant and what's not significant. We're going to go through this paper in a lot of detail on Thursday, so read it in a very careful way, because it's going to be a template for how you read other academic papers. So this is like the first full-length academic paper that we're going to be reading in this class. We will be reading other academic papers too, but I don't want you to be intimidated by these academic papers. Question?
In terms of applying these papers for the exam, is
Yeah.
it going to be purely conceptual, or like is this just to like aid in the lectures, or how much are you guys supposed to know about the exams?
Yeah, that's a good question. I will let you know before the exam. And so what I try to do when I write the exams is to see what we covered in the lecture, what we covered in the homework. And just like I did the last time, like I will tell you, okay, this is what I expect from the exam. And I'll speak more specifically to that. So I want you to have a broad set of skills. I want you to be able to understand conceptually what's happening. So if I say describe in words, like what is happening here. So for example, in the midterm, I ask you to describe in words what happens when you are estimating your returns to school, right? So it could be something like that. Or it could be take this particular data set and come up with a coefficient that estimates this. So those are like the two extremes. I want you to be comfortable doing that broad range of things. Okay. So this is the first paper, and then the second thing that we're going to read is going to be an article, and it's called All Together Now. And what this article discusses is the merits and also the disadvantages of grouping students based on ability. Like, should you have all students together, irrespective of their abilities, or should you track students and put the really sharp students in one class together, and so on and so forth. And so it's going to discuss this. This has the feeling more of a kind of a policy brief or like a high-level summary of like literature. And so for those of you who there may be some of you who might go into politics or policy making, or you want to go into consulting, and this will be more in the style of the kinds of things that you'll do, right? So what you'll do is you'll go to the academic literature, to the journals, and see what have scholars written about this topic, and you'll say, what do I find that's convincing about what they've said, and then you'll summarize it. So these guys find that class size is really important, these guys don't find that it's important. However, I think that these results are more reliable because the methodology that they used seems more convincing to me for X, Y, Z reasons. And then you start to synthesize everything that has been written about this. This is also the type of article that the journalist might write, or somebody that's writing for like the New Yorker that's writing a more extended piece might write for a reasonably sophisticated audience that's not technical. Okay. And so I want to give you a breadth of experiences in terms of being able to go from the academic literature to something that you might write for like the Greenville Times, for example. Okay. So those are the two papers. Please read these papers. And I've been really intentional about not overloading you with a ton of papers, because I actually want you to read the papers that I to assign, and this is an important part of the process. Okay. So what we're going to do today is in the first half of the lecture, I'm going to introduce the general notion of peer effects, and then in the second half of the lecture, we're going to have a discussion of the paper that we're reading for today. And that paper is Neighborhoods and Peers in the Production of Schooling. And Shannon is going to lead our discussion of that. Okay. So we're first going to start off with the definition of peer effects. I'm going to be pretty explicit. Okay. A pure fact is a type of behavioral externality so let's consider person A is a friend or peer of person B. If the actions of person B affects the actions and decisions of person A. We say that person A's actions are influenced by peer effects. Who can give me, given this definition of peer effects, who can give me an example of a peer effect at Clemson?
Isn't this essentially like peer pressure?
Peer pressure is, okay, so you can think about peer pressure as an example. Let's think about Clemson. What's an example of, what's something that you didn't do before you came to Clemson that you do religiously now that you come to Clemson?
Watch football.
Watch football. Right. Why did you watch football?
Because everybody likes football.
Exactly, because everybody likes football. That's amazing. And where are you from, Arturo? You're from Spain. So like, is there like a big football culture, like American football culture in Spain? Exactly. So if you go back, let's say you go back to Spain and you start telling all of your friends to watch American football, would they start watching American football? Why not? But they really like you and you like football.
Because like nobody there likes football.
Exactly, right? And so that's a great example of another, thank you very much. You even wearing Clemson like orange, that's fantastic. Okay, great. So these peer effects are all around you, right? And you see this great example. Is there anybody else in this room who's from another country? Anybody else who's an international student? Hannah. Okay, where are you from, Hannah?
England?
Okay. And did you watch football before you came to the US?
No.
Do you watch football now?
Yeah.
Why?
It's everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. It's a thing, right? It's a thing here. Okay, good. All right. So now let's talk about mechanisms. And one of the things that I want to make sure that we get from this class is that you realize that economics is all around you. So like just trying to think about like why people watch football, you can use these models that we're going to talk about. Okay, so these mechanisms. So basically, when asked the question, how do peer effects affect or influence behavior? Okay, so the first one is, we can call this evolving social norms. So the more that your friends do it, the more that you want to do it. So football is a great example of this, right? So the more that others do it, the more expected or socially acceptable it is. And you can probably think about things that have changed your attitudes and your behaviors, right? The other thing is direct learning. Can you give me an example of direct learning through peer effects? class?
Group work, like learning from your peers.
Exactly. So you're in a group with your friends, and who are the people on your team in this class?
Connor.
Right. And so if you and Connor are working on a problem set, and you say, "Hey, Connor, I think that this is wrong," and he's like, "Yeah, I know you're right." When he goes on the test, he's going to do what you said, right? Because you pointed out that it was wrong. And so there's this direct mechanism of learning from your peers. So you learn from the people you interact with. Okay. And the third one is network formation. So the way that we think about network formation is just by virtue of being around these people, you develop social ties, you develop social bonds with them. You become a part of this Clemson family, right? And then there's certain things that we as Clemson people like we do together, right? Okay. So let's see. Okay. Right. And from an economic standpoint, the reason why this is really important is because in a lot of contexts, either you can't directly control who your peers are, or maybe you can control who your peers are. And that produces like very interesting outcomes. So take, for example, the family that says, we're going to move to this really nice neighborhood because we know that we're going to be able to get high quality schools here. Because all of the other parents are like really good, and the kids are going to be nice, and the teachers are going to be high quality, right? And so you can choose who your kids interact with. Or you can have another situation where you go to a public school and everybody is allowed to be there. So your kids are associating with people from all over the world, right? Or all over the county. And you have less control in that context. And so from a policy standpoint, understanding these peer effects is going to be really important because they're going to tell us about, they're going to give us information about what is the optimal configuration of people given whatever our objectives are. So when you look at the workforce and even universities, like a really big goal is diversity. We need to have diverse groups, from a gender standpoint, from a racial standpoint, from all of these other perspectives as well too, right? And so there's this very concerted effort to come up with policies to push that because the belief is that there's some link between diversity and outcomes that universities or businesses care about. Okay. So let's run through the following thought experiment, and this is my landscape. Okay. So you have a researcher standing at the door. So I mean, like literally you have somebody that's here, like just looking into the classroom, right? And this person can observe gender, race, GPA, interactions, and the final test score in the class. For each student. Right? Now, let's suppose that the researcher found a correlation between the grades of students. How would he or she explain this? Right? Okay. All right. So there are a couple of different effects, right? So One is going to be what we call exogenous or contextual effects. And so these are going to be things that are immutable about the individual, right? Yeah.
Correlation between the grades of students and the climate.
So the correlation between the grades of students within the class.
Individual students.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the idea. So if we come into the room and we see that, okay, the people are sitting close together, like they tend to have, like, there's a positive correlation between the grades, right? And so the question is, am I smarter because I'm sitting next to a smarter person? Am I less smart because I'm sitting next to a less smart person? So that's the idea. That's the idea here. Okay. So these exogenous or contextual effects are going to have to do with things about the group of students that are going to be. So for example, the gender, the race, and the age. And it could just be that there's something special about these types of students. It could just be that younger kids fidget a lot more. And this is why we see, on average, like there are lower test scores in a classroom where on average the students tend to be younger. Okay. So these contextual effects are going to do that. Are going to tell us that the characteristics of your peers affect your performance. So one thing, for example, is in this class we have 3 graduate students, right? 3 graduate students are men. So we have 2 graduate students in this class, right? And so you can think that, well, okay, if you're in an undergrad class where they're graduate students, it's like that's going to impact the class because maybe the graduate students are going to ask really intelligent questions, and then everyone's like, I want to be like a graduate student when I grow up, right? So that could be like an example of a contextual effect. It's just the fact that they are graduate students, or maybe even if they don't say anything at all in class, but you just like, oh, they're grad students in class, I need to dress more smartly, right? So the characteristics of your peers affect their performance, e.g. race, gender, age, etc. Can you all see my right here? Okay. The second is going to be what's called endogenous effects. And essentially, this is like a feedback loop, right? My performance is going to affect that person's performance, but their performance is also going to be affected by my performance too. So think about it as you're in a classroom where the teacher's grading on the curve, right? I know that my absolute grade is going to depend on the grades of my peers. So if my peers really try hard, I'm going to try harder because they're trying harder. And because I'm trying harder, they're going to try harder too. And so it's endogenous in the sense that it's being determined within the context of the model. Everybody remember that word from when we first started? Okay, good. All right. So you can think about this as a feedback loop. My effort or decisions depend on my peers' decisions. And you can think about this as being the direct peer effect that we want to get on my peers' decisions. Okay. And then the third explanation, so we start again with this context where he sees these correlation between these grades. Like, how do I explain these things, right? So it could be that we're just in the reason why people are doing really well is because they're in a college class. There's something about college that makes people feel like I really need to focus because I'm in college, right? Or it could be these endogenous effects. I'm in a classroom and like I'm seeing other people work hard, I want to work harder. Or I'm in a place where I see people are slacking and then I want to slack because they're slacking too. Right? Or you could be like, did you guys watch the game with the Seattle Seahawks and the Arizona Cardinals, where both of them missed the field goal at the end? It's crazy. It's like, okay, you would miss a field goal, I'll miss a field goal too, right? At least at Clemson, we know that if the other guy misses the field goal, what do you do? All right. The other thing is correlated effects. And so these are things that affect the entire group, right? So the difference between the correlated effects and the exogenous or contextual effects is the exogenous effects are these just like attributes or characteristics of the people or the situation, right? The correlated effect is something that they all commonly experience. So for example, you may all be doing amazingly in this class because I'm an awesome teacher, right? That's a correlated effect. Or it could be that there's someone outside that's like tapping on the door during your exam. And we see that everybody like this poorly because that person's tapping on the door. So this is a correlated effect. So these are things commonly experienced by all members of the group. For example, having an awesome professor. Or getting free Chick-fil-A right before the exam. Okay, so here's the deal. So we first start off, so let's take a step back. So when we started off in this class, we were looking at these utility maximization models where my utility just depended on my decisions, right? And so it didn't matter what anybody else did in the world. It was like, look, if I'm eating a bowl of cereal, like I'm gonna be happy, right? But we can also live in a world where my enjoyment of a bowl of cereal, it matters if somebody else is eating with me. If I'm sitting across from the table and I'm eating, and the person is looking at my food instead of talking to me because they don't have food, my enjoyment of the cereal can diminish, right? So we can think about this. We talked about this in the language of game theory initially, right? Where the utility that I get from a particular action depends on the actions of somebody else too. And so you can think about pair effects even within this context. And so we said, well, look, if we see a correlation between the actions of individuals, that could be coming from three potential sources. It could just be that there are certain similarities that they have in terms of who they are, like people from America love pizza, right? It could be these endogenous effects, right? Where it's like we have a pizza eating contest, and it's like if I see you eating more than me, I'm going to eat more because you're eating more, and we kind of have this kind of feedback. Or it could be these correlated effects, like there's just free pizza, and I'm eating pizza, and Arturo is eating pizza because there's just free pizza. Okay, so these are the three different like mechanisms where we could be getting this from. Now, what we want to figure out is we really want to pin down, we want to decompose the actions into these three different components, and we're particularly interested in these endogenous effects in terms of thinking about how does the actions of my peers influence my own decisions, because it's going to create this kind of a spillover, this peer pressure component, or the noise that we see in the state of a concept. Okay, so right, so the challenge is going to be we definitely need to know what these correlated effects are, because if we don't measure these properly, we can be attributing that to the peer effects, but in fact it's not due to the peer effects. The other thing about these peer effects too is because it's endogenous, what we really would like is we would like something that's going to be an instrument, something that's going to affect what the decision of my peer is, but that's going to be uncorrelated with my own, that's going to be uncorrelated with my own decision, except through the way in which it affects my peer's decision. And so this could be something that's predetermined, like for example, like their SAT score or something else like that, so that we could truly isolate like a causal estimate of the peer effect, because we don't want to just get like the snowballing effect of the peer effect. And so in this context too, we also are going to need to look for instruments. Okay, so let me write this up. Alright, cool. So, I'm going to write it from model first. Does everybody have this in this? I'm going to erase these guys. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to write a model of P of X. So if we observe the actions and we know what these attributes are, how do we estimate what P of X are? Okay. So our models of P of X. Okay. So our first model is going to be linear in these models. And so what this is going to say is your actions are going to depend on the average actions of your peers, right? So everybody's trying to hit the average. Okay. So let y I c, let this be the outcome or the decision of student I in class C. And our model is going to be yic is going to be equal to beta 1 x bar, and the bar is just going to mean average, right? And this x is going to be some characteristic. So this x is going to be x bar minus IC. Now this minus sign in front of the I is just going to be telling us that the average is taken when we exclude person I's characteristic. Okay? So in game, we saw this a bit in game theory. So this is x minus I. So let me find this. So x bar minus I is going to be the average group characteristic. For example, like the average age of all students in the class, excluding person H. So in particular, that's going to be 1 over n minus 1, the sum over j not equal to I.